Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. It's our Wednesday webinar series here at Bossed Up. I'm Emilie Aries, Bossed Up's founder and CEO, and I am so excited to be joined by Erin Browder, who is a leadership consultant, career coach, and one of our featured trainers here at Bossed Up. We're going to give folks just a minute or two more to log on because I know everybody's finding that link and registering and getting synced up with Zoom. But in the meantime, just a couple housekeeping things of note. You should be able to use the chat function throughout today's webinar, which if you don't see a chat box on your window right now, look for the three little dots on the More button where you can enter the chat room there. Once you've entered the chat room, make sure that the drop-down menu has selected all panelists and attendees so we can see all of your messages. And give us a little shout to let us know where you're tuning in from. We've got Bossed Up community members all over the place, internationally, and we want to make sure we know where folks are tuning in from. So I'm actually here in Denver, my home, for a change, after having a very busy travel schedule this month. And Erin, where are you tuning in from?
I'm in Long Beach, LA area. And just like you, I've been traveling. So it's been nice these last couple of weeks. I've been able to wake up in my own bed.
Isn't that nice? So excited to have Erin tuning in from LA. And she'll be joining us in Los Angeles this November as one of our featured trainers at our very first California Bossed Up Bootcamp. Coming to Los Angeles this November. So definitely check that out if you or someone you know is looking to navigate career transition like a boss. So hi from, who's this? Pennsylvania. All right.
Hey.
Give us a shout out and tell us where you're tuning in from. In the meantime, let me tell you a little bit more about Erin, who is a leadership consultant on a mission to humanize the workplace. So you can understand why she was such a great addition to our trainer team and why we here at Bossed Up share so many values. She helps leaders, teams, and organizations go from disjointed, soul-sucking experiences to making work a place where you can really thrive. So today's conversation, all about mastering the interview, is to help make sure that if you're in a toxic workplace, you can get out and find a better place to work that's not going to drive you crazy and is going to be a good, sustainable fit for your long-term well-being. She's a speaker. You might see her across the country traveling to give speeches and work with organizations, and she coaches individuals on their career journeys. So welcome to today's webinar, Erin. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. I love being a part of this community and supporting people as they navigate their pathways. Leaders pivot into different roles and organizations. As you mentioned, with healthy workplaces, it's all about getting people where they're a good fit, because that's healthy both for the organization as well as for you. So I like to look at the application process like a love story. And, you know, I know that you all talked to Monica about resumes and kind of like that's like your first date a little bit, even the cover letter, you know, conversation. Anyways, I have a lot to say about all of that, but I know that, you know, you all have done those things and are at various stages in your interview process. Maybe we can pop in one of those questions, Emilie.
Sure, that's a great idea. So one last piece of housekeeping as I launch this this poll, the one about the most challenging parts of interviews. Does that sound right?
That sounds good.
Okay. So we're going to launch a poll to get us started. And I also want to let you know that if you can't stick around for the entirety of today's conversation, we are recording this webinar. So you will be able to see this, and we'll send you the full recording via email within 24 hours. Erin was also just referencing a webinar we hosted, I want to say last week. We've been hosting webinars every Wednesday for the last month and a half or so. They've been really great. I know we've got a bunch of repeat folks here. Shannon's been joining us for a bunch. Hi, Shannon from Michigan. And you can see them all also on our YouTube page. So if you go to youtube.com/bossedupORG, you'll find a bunch of replays there. We're also doing more as we reorganize our website this year to make it easier to find all the great resources we have available to you. So I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to weigh in on this poll. What is the most challenging part of interviews for you? You can pick more than one if you see fit. And I'm going to wrap up that poll and share the results now. and then I'll disappear and let you take it away, Erin.
This is awesome. This is awesome that it's answering the questions, because so much of what we're going to do today and talk about are the questions that you can expect and prepare for. So I love a nerd, trying to be a perfectionist, right? We're always trying to guess, what are those people thinking across the table? And I have to share, I have been on both sides of interviewing. So I've been the interviewee, I've been the interviewer, and having that perspective really will give me some good context to support you on your journey. Woo! All right, we can go to the next slide. Hello there, just wanted to say hello. Create a warm environment for us all as we get down to the nitty-gritty of interviewing. Next slide. It's kind of nice to have someone do your slides. So here's a little history of my work. I did some time in corporate, and then I became an educator. And then from there, I moved into a lot of organization transformation. So working with schools to recenter their organizational culture. I became a leader in nonprofit work. I've done a lot of work around trauma-informed approaches, both in, mostly in human-serving organizations. So hospitals, healthcare systems, schools, school districts, nonprofits, government agencies. And that's really important to this conversation because a lot of the work that I've done was grant funded. And so if you know anything about working under grant funded projects, is that the grants run out. And in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you might find yourself looking for another job. And what I was able to do across my journey is really master the art of interviewing, master the art of finding jobs that are perfect fits for me. So much so that in the last 10 years, every position that I've applied for, I've gotten offers for. Now, there's something in there, because it doesn't mean that I applied for 500 jobs and got 500 acceptance letters. It means that I've honed in on where my perfect opportunities are, where I'm really a good fit for an organization and they're a good fit for me. Because that's one of the mindsets that we have to reframe when we're on this process of finding a position. Because if we come in and we're like, I just need this job, then that energy is really gonna take over the interview. But when we come in and we're like, you need me too, I am an asset to this work, then now the tables are turning and they're going to be even more attracted to you. So really sit in that space that you're an asset to wherever you're going, and that they need your work as much as you want to be a part of their organization. And so anyways, I'm working now mostly, Emilie described, with leaders to build healthy, resilient workplaces. All right, let's move on. Was there a question in the chat, Emilie? Are you going to interrupt?
There was just a little comment saying that you mentioned corporate as though corporate offices are jail.
Oh, no.
What do you think about that?
Thank you for mentioning that. So when I say it was early on in my professional career, and that where I've started to find my sweet spot began as an educator. But no, I worked for 5 years in corporate insurance and corporate responsibility.
Totally. And not all corporations are soul-sucking toxic.
Oh, absolutely. Hell no. We need people everywhere.
Yeah. Totally.
That is the beauty of knowing what you bring. We need people who have these values in IT. We need people that have these values in graphic design and retail. Like, nothing is off the table.
Yeah.
And that's why there's really a space for all of us out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you launch the second poll to get a sense of where folks are in the interview process?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So as we talk about interviewing like a boss today, I want to get a sense of how urgent is this for you? How relatable is this for your particular situation as an employee, as someone who's preparing for interviews? Are you in the thick of it? Are you just getting started, or are you thinking about it?
And is the idea of interviewing so freaking stressful that you're staying in a place that you don't want to be in?
Right. It's a great point. And
Yeah.
again, feel free to select more than one. We'll give you about 15 more seconds to do this, and then I'll share the results.
Yeah, and let me just kind of put a little plug. I am so excited about this topic. I have a lot of information, so as do you. So feel free to, put the brakes on if you want to have clarifying questions, if there's something that you want me to go a little bit more deep in. This is a conversation, even if it doesn't feel like one.
Yeah, hit us up in chat, and I'll make sure to get your voice heard.
Starting to research and look at new jobs. Awesome. This is a good place to be in. And this is, this is actually really perfect because you want to really nail down these questions and the information that you'll bring into interviews before you actually, before you're on the spot, before you're in that seat. So this slide here is asking about who's in the room. So I'm just curious, what careers do you all have? Where are you currently working? Because I have a lot of different contextual examples. And so I want to get to know a little bit more about you. What roles do you currently own or are you filling in your workplace? HR manager, IT director, PhD candidate, awesome. Tech consultant, perfect. College lecturer, faculty, awesome. All right, so we definitely span several different sectors. So again, feel free to ask questions that are more specific to your work. So here are our intended outcomes. We're going to talk about getting clear, planning for those interviews, getting ready, preparing beforehand, no waiting to the last minute. That doesn't happen here. And getting started. So maintaining your composure when you walk inside of that room, that again, you know that you're asset, you're bringing something to this position, to this department, to this team, and so on. All right, next slide, please. So I mentioned before the stress that keeps us stuck, that keeps us in a job maybe that we don't like, that when we start to research positions, we're just flustered. Maybe we're in panic mode. Maybe there is something motivating you in your application process or your job search that you need to move to a different location. Your family is changing. Maybe you're having a baby. Maybe your husband has relocated or needs to relocate the family. I really urge you in these moments to get clear on what you're prioritizing, what is motivating you through the job search, because once that's clear, it's going to help settle some of those nerves. What do I mean? If you are in a position where you absolutely need to make more money and that's your top priority, then when you're looking at positions, instead of, oh, but I want to do that so badly, that's like my passion, or I got to do this because that's what, my family wants me to do. You know what you're motivated for. You know what your top 3 things are. If it's salary, if it's benefits, if it's vacation. And so that's what's guiding you. And it helps to bring you clarity and to settle some of that stress and like the restlessness that a lot of time gets kicked up when we're looking for work. Another source of stress is our own self-doubt. One of the biggest keys as you're moving through the interview process is that you have to own your accomplishments. You have to own your hero's journey. What are all the different things that have happened in your life that have led you to that moment? That's why I appreciate so many of you that are looking at new jobs now, or you're currently like in that beginning stage, because this is an opportunity for you to get clear as you move through the process. You really want to get grounded in yourself beforehand. And again, master some of these answers so that when the time comes, you're very familiar. They're like on the tip of your tongue. All right, next slide. Interviews are the heart of the application process. Big point here. Your resume got you through the door. You might have so-so skills when it came to your phone interview. And so they want to check you out. This is where the love story happens. Someone, maybe 3 out of 4 people that are interviewing you are totally in love, but that one person isn't convinced. This is where you can nail it. Everything is possible if you're on an interview. No matter what type of scrutiny or questions or doubt that you have, if someone has extended that invite, fill into the confidence that they have in you as a candidate to bring you in and give you face-to-face time. So just own the love around interviews because they're really powerful. I was gonna skip this, but we'll do it. My short-term goal is to bluff my way through this job interview. My long-term goal is to invent a time machine so I can come back and change everything I said so far, right? How many times have we been in this situation where we're listening to ourselves instead of being present and wishing we could take back some of what we said? Next slide. As I mentioned, your foot is in the door. You got your resume, you might have had a phone interview, and here you go. And actually, a lot of what we'll talk about can be leveraged or used in the phone interview. Remember, you're not bragging. You are owning your accomplishments. You are an asset to that company. They don't know who you are. You have to share all of who you are and why you're a good fit. All right, next. So part one is research, research, research. You want to know as much as you can about the company, the position that you're filling. So if you are interested in a particular company, what are the values of that company? What are the people like that work there? Glassdoor is an excellent resource. Obviously, too, it tells you about salary and benefits. Even if you were to just Google project manager at nonprofit organizations, you're going to find out a lot about what is expected in that role. And here, if you are making a lateral move, so you're already a project manager or you're already a retail consultant and you're moving into a different company, then learning about that company can start to layer onto your experience and why you are a good fit there. The industry, what are some of the trends that are happening? How can you be on top of those trends so that when you're sitting at a table or the desk and you're being interviewed, you can be an advocate, you can be an innovator. A lot of the work I do is around entrepreneurial leadership. I cannot tell you how important these traits that are associated typically with entrepreneurs are inside of established organizations and institutions. Things like taking a risk, things like standing up or innovating, being creative, finding new ways of doing old things. You know, these are ways that you want to, read whatever publication is the most popular in healthcare systems and government trends so that you have that verbiage that you can bring into the conversation. So let's talk about what are some of the questions that you can expect to hear in an interview? Who do you, and please feel free to jot these in the chat, but I have a list here that I'm gonna kind of read from. Also, the checklist that I have is going to be available. There's a link that we have on our last slide, so you can follow along. If you'd like to take notes now, feel free. Who do you think, or why do you think you're a good fit for this job? How does this job fit in your long-term vision? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? What is one thing you need to work on? These are standard questions. You can expect that they're going to be asked of you. Why do you think you're a good fit for this job? This is where someone wants to know your life story. They want to know what has led you there and not your life story with all the chapters, right? Choose 4 to 5 main points of your life that have led you to where you are. A long-winded version might start in childhood. One of mine is I'm a middle child. I've felt invisible. I was always a self-starter, so my parents let me do things all on my own. But what I lost was the connection. When I needed help, they kind of prompted me to figure it out on my own instead of sitting with me. And there's like that bonding that was missing. Hence, relationships were really important to me. When I first started, working, I had really strong relationships, and people, nominated me for leadership roles. People, relationships or connections led me to change into different organizations where I held higher level positions. So this is kind of my story and where I've landed in front of these people. I had a professor once who asked me, "What is your leadership story?" And they weren't looking for your leadership story with all the laced accomplishments and accolades, but really, where where did your hero's journey begin? When you think about some of those critical moments in your life that led you to find peace in what you love to do, your talents and your passion, where did they begin? Think about that. Have a list. Again, 4 to 5 points that you want to make sure that you hit on that are relevant to the job that you're applying to, right? So if you're applying to graphic design, maybe your story isn't going to be the same as someone who is applying as a technician somewhere. You know, make it really pertinent. If, you know, if it's design or art, you know, like where did you have to fight for your creativity? Where did you have to, you know, create a space where there wasn't one? You know, all of these kind of, you know, really life-changing experiences, because this is also where the people at the table are going to connect to you. And I'm going to tell you, as an interviewer, you can hear superficial stories a mile away. So this is where you really want to get things that you're energetically connected to, not just the story that, you know, people want to hear, which could be, you know, you tried. I mean, the defying the odds is also a really good one, but you just have to find the thread that really resonates with you and in that work. If you have questions about that, feel free to put them in the chat. Another way to prepare is to really get clear on what your values are. You want to choose 3 to 4 values that are your like hardcore things. So if it's integrity, if it's honesty, if it's service, to own those values, and you're going to lace all these personal questions with that. So if honesty is a huge one of yours, what was the time that you had to be honest and it hurt other people? But then you persevered after, right? Because with the hero's journey, you know, you have that awakening, something usually negative or veers off from what you expected to happen happens. You go through the lull of trying to figure it out and you're grasping at straws. You finally get your resources together, you break through, and you come back to that place changed. So you don't want to just tell a story that ends negatively and then you're like startled. You want to talk about how it has impacted you, and now in that same position, you're thinking differently, right? You're adaptive. Another trait of entrepreneurial leaders, right? In this world, we're changing. And a lot of the knowledge and the skill set are things that we can look up and read, you know, if, you know, we have the privilege of being literate. So how are you leveraging your interpersonal skills or adaptivity to make them assets to help a situation be better? Yes, Emily.
We've got a quick question here from
Sure.
Crystal that I think is a really great point. As you know, I'm a big fan of the hero's journey and being able to tell your story in a compelling way.
Yes.
And she says, you know, how do you really hone in on your values? How do you find that and not just use buzzwords, even if it's an internal search and not, you know, necessarily figuring it out for presentation's sake? But, you know, how does someone really drill down into what their core values are? Any tips?
I have a bunch. So one is, I would think about all of the big moments in your life that you've persevered and start to distill them. And what are the things that surface from them? What really rocked you to your core, even if it hurt or if it propelled you? So, you know, relationship connection is huge to me. I would say that's probably one of my core values. So not feeling connected, feeling invisible, you know, those things have made me want to have stronger, better relationships. And so that's one of them. Another is, if you look, and you can Google, because I've done workshops around, you know, value, knowing your core values. You can Google lists of values. And then from there, you know, choose 10. And then from those 10, you know, distill it again. And I actually might have, I have to go into the stacks, but I might have some worksheets on that to help you kind of identify what your core qualities or core values are.
Awesome. And you'll be able to connect directly with Erin after this webinar too. So we'll make sure you have her info. One thing I would add to that too is to take an inventory of the biggest choice moments in your life when you made a choice. not when things happen to you, because stuff happens, right?
Yes.
Like tragedy strikes, things happen, and that's not a demonstration of your agency. But
Yes.
what about when you decided to major in that, or when you decided to quit that program, or leave that state, or change the nature of your relationship, or decide to invest in yourself by going to therapy? Think about the big moments in your life, and maybe they weren't big, maybe they felt small, but when you used your personal agency to make a change in your life or make a decision in your life, and start digging into that and ask the question, why? The question why is to me the beginning of figuring out your values. Like, why did I do that? Why?
Right, Emily.
Yeah. I mean, why did I decide to not go to grad school? Why did I decide to break up with that relationship, or leave that relationship? Or why did I decide to focus on electoral campaigns straight out of college instead of international endeavors? Like when you really scratch the surface, you start to say, well, it's because I really value giving back to my country and my community. I really value being cared for as much as I'm caring for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, you start to ask, well, why do you value that? Or why did you decide to do that?
And you start to rank it, right? So you realize, is honesty, not to say, I mean, honesty and connection are both important, but which one is the most important for you? And as you're doing, just to add to your whys, don't stop after one why. Do at least 3 to 5.
Yes.
Why didn't I go to do the international pathway?
Right. I sat through a graduate class at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government that was all about people, power, and change. It was really about organizing. And I saw this professor, this really prolific professor, Marshall Gans, in front of a class of about 100 people, put this young woman on the spot. And he said, well, why did you come here? Why are you in this classroom? Why are you in this country? Why are you here today? And I mean, it was really hard. It was very, I would say, like foundation shaking, because it makes you question your choices in a way that can make you feel a little defensive, but really you have to defend your values. It forces you to recognize that you do have more power and choice in your life than sometimes we think. And those choices we make are a reflection of our values.
Absolutely. I value influence. Maybe someone else doesn't see that as important, but like for me, the power of influence, I think that's why I love, this work and interviewing, or just understanding the mutual fit or reciprocity that happens in the application process, is because my power of influence is powerful as heck, you know? And so I can't put myself in a place where I'm compromising like my values, or you feel restricted, or you feel small, or if those things come up, then I know it's time for me to like find a new place, because I can change people.
I mean, it also, I think the best interviews tell a story that illustrate your values.
Absolutely.
Describing the choices you've made. I'm going to pop out now because I know we're already halfway through the
So to Emily, tell me how much time, how much more time?
We're halfway through. We've got 30.
Okay. All right. This is so exciting, right? So these tell me about yourself questions, you really want to hone in. And I am going to give you guys like one of my favorite golden nuggets. I love it. I love it. I love it. You got to script your answers. You got to script your responses. So as you go through these questions, and when you sign up for my checklist, this is all on this same slide, Emily. I just didn't want to put so many slides in here, but as you go through the questions on that checklist, take each one and just write out the answers. Maybe you're not a writer, you don't want to do paragraphs. No problem, bullet. Oh, you don't like to bullet, you don't want to list. Maybe you want to draw. Whatever you do, there is a such thing as motor memory, and you want to just have it out in front of you. This is going to give you so much confidence as you navigate these questions in front, and the heat is on, or the pressure's on, in front of the people that are making decisions. You gotta script your responses. I can't tell you how much it has helped me. I script them for phone interviews. I've scripted them for in-person interviews. Obviously, you don't have them in front of you, but just that reviewing and constant revising are things that are going to register what that experience is like. And maybe for you, you want to rehearse and do some role playing. If it's a big enough interview, well, first off, I mean, we should treat every interview like it's the, you know, the big thing, because it will take us to the next step on our pathway. Then take it seriously. Sit down with a colleague and have them ask you these questions, and do it until you start to get away from some of those jitters. So I know I already mentioned, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? This second bullet says personal and professional goals. Do you have them? What are your life goals? What do you want to see happen in the world? I want to humanize the workplace. I want to build healthy workplaces so that we can have healthy professionals, people that have professional well-being, interact and engage and make sure that they're serving at their highest capacity. If they're serving human beings, if they're building products, I want them happy as heck in those meetings. I want them happy to be around each other, to feel welcome, to feel connected and belonging, to feel safe, right? Those are things I know you can feel my passion for that. What are you passionate about? Why is human resources important in an organization or in that sector that you're working in? Why is information technology important to that company and someone with your values in that department, right? That you're really getting clear. One way to do this is to consider a legacy plan, right? So not to be all morbid, but, you know, when you're gone from this earth, you know, what do you want on your gravestone? What's the legacy? What's the book you want written about you? What chapter are you on now? You know, in education, we do something we call backwards planning, where we think about what we want, future oriented, and then we go back from there of what we're going to do now. You want to have all of this, you know, it's not going to be 100%, it's fluid, it's constantly evolving, but you have the clarity around it. I don't want anyone in any organization that I've ever worked with or interviewed for who doesn't have a plan, because you don't want someone that's going to come and suck the life force out of your organization. You want someone that's going to bring momentum and help accelerate, you know, all of the good work that you're doing. So these intentions, goals, you need to be very clear on them. Other questions that always come up are about team experience. We're not working in silos anymore. Cubicles, they are timestamped for the most part. So people want to know that you can work with other people. What are your interpersonal skills? There's 5 sections, and I actually wrote this down to make sure that I share this with you all, and it is in the checklist. There's 5 buckets that you want to make sure that your skill set, that when you're talking about your skill set, that you address. Interpersonal skills, the way you conduct yourself. So kind of, this is like a weird one, but like your character. So punctuality, your composure, you know, just really your self-awareness, your self-management is important. Another entrepreneurial skill, emotional intelligence, right? Knowing that you have boundaries. These are really important things to touch on. Communication. What are your communication skills? Can you navigate difficult, courageous conversations? Can you stand up for what you believe in without stepping on someone else's toes? Depending on your industry, those might be key pieces that your company is gaps that they're looking to fill. Stressful situations. How do you manage, you know, when you've planned something for, you know, 3 months on a project management or, you know, managing a project, and then something happens and it totally reverses all of the work you've done? Do you have a story around that? How did you come out, you know, successful? These are the stories you want to bring into your interview. What about mediating conflict? You know, on teams, you know, how have you worked through differences? How do you manage your tasks? How do you manage your projects? You know, what are things that you have done where you've taken something from an idea through completion? Okay, so I know this is a lot of information. Again, there will be a checklist, and if you're taking notes and you have clarifying questions, let us know in the chat box. So another one that comes up a lot, standard question, is something, I call them false negatives, right? Like people want to know, what do you not do right? And it's kind of like, how do you really answer that question without making yourself look bad? So this one, again, because we talk about pre-planning, we talk about script, you already have in your back pocket. So some of the ones that I have shared are saying, I'm trying to phrase it in the right way, but saying yes to too many things, right? Not saying no, or not having boundaries, not having the best life-work balance. So knowing from the research what your company is looking for, think about what false negative where you can talk about, you need to work in that area, but it's not something that is going to give you a red flag or pull you out of the interviewing process. All right. So depending on, who you are, what might you, say when they're going to ask you, what would you have done differently in that situation? Really think through that. Again, the third bullet here, taking an inventory of your skill set and experiences, what you offer. I kind of mentioned that with those 5 buckets, being really clear on, the things that are very much a part of your core being and what you'll support in other people. Another example of teamwork might be coaching. Oh, and this is a good false negative. This is a good one. Not doing everything for everybody and realizing that you need to coach someone to become more resourceful to do that work, right? And this has actually come up in my own path where I've taken on some more responsibilities from someone else instead of helping them do it better. So if that's your story, that looks really good to prospective employers. What's up, Emilie?
Great question here from Karen, and it's related to this idea of false negatives. One of the most common questions that comes up in interviews is about what are your weaknesses? And it can feel a little schmaltzy to be like, well, I work too hard. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There's so many ways to come across as not authentic. So Karen's question is how do you balance answering the question while still coming across as authentic and not just saying what you think they want to hear?
Yeah. So one is you're putting it in the past. So you've already learned that lesson. And it is clear when you're still in the wounded phase, depending on what your false negative is. And thank you for stating the question. The question is, what is a weakness that you have? And the answer would be some of these false negatives that I've addressed. So in the example that I just shared about taking on someone else's workload, what I realized was the more that I did the work for someone, the more they brought it to me. So in flipping that, when I helped them be more resourceful, both that person felt efficacious, in their work. And then I felt, better because I was able to focus on what I needed to focus on. But I can tell that story because it's in the past. I've learned that lesson. And now I know when I'm working with someone else and I see maybe some of those traits or tendencies that I'm going to take a pause and coach them through the process and teach it to them in a sense, and not necessarily, just grab and take on what they have. So let me know if that answers your question. And maybe if you have an example for yourself of where you've learned maybe to mediate a conflict yourself instead of taking it to a higher up, and what you learned was the perspective of that other person was very valuable, and you saw where they were coming from, where before you might have been assuming or inferring, what they were feeling.
Yeah. One of the things that, just to add to that I've seen work well as an interviewer is when people are real with you about something they're actually making improvements on. So I think coming across as authentic starts with being vulnerable in the interview and being okay with not being perfect, which is a whole psychological struggle when it comes to acknowledging that, you are not your skills. Your self-worth is not derived from how perfect you are. And it's true. When I can see a well-adjusted human being on the other end of an interview, they're the kind of person who says, I've really been working on improving my writing. I tend to rush. And so because I get so excited about writing, sometimes there's a lot of copy errors. So I've really become a more mindful writer, slowed down, made less errors, and that's something I'm working on right now. But to be honest, it seems like a lifelong challenge because it's balancing my energy with my copywriting, right? So
Yeah.
someone who's willing to say, listen, this is a real thing that I'm working on. It's so obvious when they're well adjusted in that they don't feel shame over
Yeah.
their imperfections. And I like
Thank
hiring people who aren't in a shame spiral, you know what I mean? Who are willing to take feedback constructively. So it starts with really helping yourself to feel like you're not your mistakes. And that's a whole other, therapy session.
Yeah, but you're hitting it, because it's all about confidence, it's all about like that energy that you're bringing into the interview, and not even so much of what the stories are, that you're sharing. Everything is important. And even in what you've shared, definitely want to be vulnerable. But again, through your research, you should understand what it is they're looking most for and your strengths. And your story of weakness should not be in the area that they're looking for the strength. Cool. That's all kind of like caveat to that. Right. So if you're interviewing to be a teacher and you're like, oh, I'm scared of, behavior management, or a kid, like cursing me out. Well, you probably are in the wrong place.
Right. It's also about selecting the right challenge, like not something that's fundamental to the job that you're interviewing for, but I don't know.
And that's why prep is so important. And, as we're thinking about prep and you're rehearsing and you're writing out, your answers to some of these questions, when you're in the moment and they're asking you a question, you want to answer it, you want to respond, and then you want to bring in some past experience that supports that. So if they give you a scenario and they ask you, what might you do in this situation? Then you want to answer that question. And then you want to bring in, this reminds me of a time XYZ. And you'll have the capacity to do that, to be agile, because you've already scripted and prepared so much for those standard questions. So now you can deviate and you don't have to feel the same restlessness, because you got that. And you can focus on, what are the scenarios or the different things that they're putting in front of you, and why you are a good fit, because you've mulled over all those bullets and the different ways that you've prepared for that interview. If you are switching a career, this is a big one. You can acknowledge, that you're going in a new direction, but also share what led you to that space, right? Share kind of what those stepping stones were that are having you pivot. And in the entrepreneurial leadership space, we want people who have diverse skill sets. So don't feel like, oh, like I've worked in this sector for so long, they're not going to want me. That's not so much the case. You do need to kind of connect the dots and identify what it is that they're looking for and how that fits your skill set. But don't think that, just because you've had a 5 to 10 year career in one sector, that automatically X's you out from pivoting and changing into somewhere new. Think about how you can bring that skill set and plug it in and help that new place be better. As always, and I think this is, the base of the conversation with values, is you want to come from a service-minded perspective. You are being of service, right? You are supporting the greater good, even if it's supply chain work, right? Even if it's things where you're not engaging with human beings regularly. You believe in that work because it makes a change, or it fills a gap, or it fills a need that someone somewhere in this world has. And you want to hold that, because there's a lot of confidence that rests in that belief. This is where you activate your light. So when they're giving you these scenarios, and a lot of it is, owning your accomplishments and, bringing your experience to the table, but the service-minded perspective is the glow. It's almost like the halo around, all that you're bringing. Because if you're working with and for other people, it's most definitely from a place of service. Emilie, I see you moving the mouse. Did you have to add something?
Nope. It's just that we got to hit the Q&A pretty soon.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, my gosh. All right. Another thing that you want to prepare, and so kind of going back a little bit and thinking about like your resume part, and I'm sure Monica spoke to you about it. One of the things I tell people when I help them with resumes is you do not want to scatter your energy. think about that picture we see all the time of the woman with the confetti and she's blowing into it. It's like, boo. What does that mean? That means you don't want to be applying for makeup artist, retail consultant, IT professional, nonprofit leader, all these different random jobs, because that is just going to have you going in circles. Once you hone in on your values and you kind of know a trajectory that you're headed in, there's not going to be so much difference in these interviews. So a lot of these answers that you're sharing will be standard. Of course, there's going to be things you'll change based on that specific company. But just know that there's a common thread that runs through these. And all that to say, think about the questions you want to know. Think about the ways that this company is going to help you fulfill your legacy plan and your lifeline, and jot down those questions. Interviewers love great, thoughtful, thought-provoking questions. So, ask them about their mission. Ask them about what they see, for themselves in 5 years, or knowing, you've done that research on trends, what are they going to do when X, Y, and Z happens? Bring those questions in. Any questions about salary and benefits should really be in the final stages of an interview. I know everyone, this is kind of like a personal style thing. Everyone has different, advice around this. Maybe Emilie has some, but you definitely don't want to talk about salary, benefits, kind of those HR type things in the first and second interviews. And some of the questions you might ask are, how long do, people, I'm trying to think of the perfect framing, but how long do people stay in the company? When they're here, what are the promotional opportunities? These things that show that you have a vested interest in this company, and you're not going to just like drop it, kind of like come and go. All right, we can go to the next slide. Oh my gosh. And some of these slides I've already kind of touched on. So this is the meeting in the middle, and kind of the love story that I've already referenced. But, we're bridging a gap. There's a gap that you're filling in their work that's going to help them do the work that they need to do better. And it's going to help you get closer to, the goals that you've created for yourself. Next slide, please. So here are those standard questions. There were some in there. I've mentioned a lot of these. I see a question, Emilie, if you want to.
I'm going to hold until the end because we've got a couple that are not totally related to things you've covered yet that we'll cover at Q&A. But if you're ready for Q&A, I think there's some.
Not yet. Give me a second. All right. So go back to that last one. There's some questions that these are just examples. Where will you take this position if you receive an offer? So this is information that you'd want to bring. Again, uplifting, coming from that service-oriented mindset. And how has your past experience prepared you to do this? We've talked ad nauseum about that, and we can go to the next one. Knowing your competition, this is huge. So who are other people applying for this job? This is just giving you one up. It's not saying that, put on your boxing gloves or anything like that, but just knowing, what's the stamina, what's the endurance, what's the caliber of the different people that are applying for this job, and what might you have in common, what might put you different, or put you in a different place. As employers and interviewers, we are looking for the unique aspects that you're bringing into this work. So, know your competition and own what makes you different, because chances are, some of what's the same is already there, right? And so, how can you not sell yourself, but, put yourself in a light where people see your value add. Next one, please. All right, so these are kind of getting started. This is the day of, I have a really juicy nugget, so nobody better leave yet. Maintaining your composure, what you wear. So every industry has different standards. In education, nonprofit spaces, it's totally acceptable, and maybe not so much in the higher executive leadership roles, but to wear a cardigan and a blouse. Whereas in corporate spaces, you might want to wear a suit. Maybe in design, you're gonna wear like a really trendy, beautifully crafted blouse that's like loud and colorful. So know the standards of your industry. what you eat. Avoid your trigger foods. If that's starch, if that's, white flour, if it's sugar, caffeine, avoid all of those things so that you're on top of your game. Eat raw foods and things that nourish you. Arrival time. We all know that we need to get places early, but I cannot tell you, I want to say at least 40% of the interviews that I've conducted, people are always running late. So it happens a lot. And you know what? The early bird catches the worm. So if there's other people in your interview pool that are running late and you're on time, I like to get to places an hour, 45 minutes ahead of time. I sit in my car and I prepare. I get my mindset together. Tip of the tongue trick. Oh my gosh, you all. So I was interviewing maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, and I got there early, sitting in my car, and I'm just kind of bored. And instead of like getting on Facebook, I would strongly suggest not to do social media because it gets your mind in different spaces. I saw this book in my back seat, and I picked it up and I just read the book. And the role was a nonprofit, an education nonprofit leadership role. And the book was about schools and something, social justice or maybe like community level work. And I read the book. And when I got into the interview, everything I read was like on the tip of my tongue. It was amazing. And the ideas or my different connections and having like that support or the language that I'd read or picked up in that text totally like greased the wheels of my interview. So another kind of golden nugget is to, up until like the last 15 minutes, don't go over your notes. Don't get like, really obsessive about what you've prepared. Just open a magazine or open a book that is in that industry and read it. Read it from an open, calm place and absorb it, because it will definitely come back into the interview. Pay attention during the interview. Look at the people on this screen in the bottom right. I have seen interviewers look like that, not with me, but just sharing the space. If your people are like looking down, looking around, looking at their phone, fumbling, then get back into your value space and own why you're different. These are things that activate your energy, your serotonin. So if things sound like you're just like drowning on and on and on, get to some stuff that really like excites you and own it. Make sure you plug that into the language so you can wake them back up or bring some enthusiasm in your voice. Again, preparing your questions beforehand. I've kind of already talked about what not to do or say. So we are done with that slide. So here, this is just a kind of like a takeaway, not something to do during the interview, but as you're preparing, you really want to silence your voice of judgment, because what we know, we talk about our hero's journey. A lot of that struggle is our ego and our fear. We're not ready for this. Oh, but there's better people. Oh, I don't have the skill set. So here's just a couple of ways to silence that voice of judgment, the VOJ. Choosing 1 to 2 fears and writing down 3 ways that you have proven that fear wrong in the past. So whatever, is driving your ego, what you're scared most about, what's a time that you've proven yourself against the odds? Own that. Live in that space. A remix could also be, how can you turn that fear into a challenge? And think about, this is even a key of resilience. Think about what are the ways that you can approach that challenge. So I'm trying to think, if someone has an example of a fear, we can maybe take an example through this. Let me think. What's a fear that either keeps you from fear of failure? So failing in the job, failing to get the interview, failing to offer the job, to lose your job. So this challenge gives me the opportunity to, think about the ways that I would keep my job, if that's the example. So if that means taking on another project, or, taking the lead, even though like I'm not sure like how the project will unfold. But if I step into a leadership role, I can experience, the planning stages, the implementation stages. This is probably a good activity to just do some journaling on, a fear of failure. Like, what are you failing? Are you failing life? Are you failing the leaders that have invested in you as as an employee? Are you failing your team? And then how can you not fail, right? What are the different things that you can do? And if you do fail, like, what does that mean to you? And how would you kind of recover from that? I'm veering this conversation off a little bit. Yes, let's move to Q&A.
Right now? Because I do want to just keep on time. I don't want to cut you off.
Well, I saw your...
Yep, it's just between us, so it's perfect.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to, can we skip to the last slide and just show your...
Yeah, let's do it.
Info? So tell us a little bit about where folks can keep in touch with you, and then we'll take a couple of questions.
Awesome, thank you. So if people go to this link, they can get a free checklist, the one that I've been referencing through this webinar. Here is my email. Feel free to email me if you have like questions. I will offer a strategy session, 20 minutes, to kind of talk about where you are in your process. The career strategy work that I've done has been with people who are in mid-level positions. So they've been in their career for about 3 to 5 years and onwards, that have, degrees and things, and they're looking to either up level, to pivot into different sectors, but their own kind of fear and doubt has them actually applying for positions that are lower than the expertise that they have. I had one woman who owned a business in one state and she moved to another, and she just, I don't know, she didn't feel confident in what she brought, and she was applying for administrative roles, and executive assistants when, she is a business owner and she has all of this other experience behind her. So if you would like to talk and kind of untangle some of your thinking and your next steps, let's do that, because I do, and I put this in the email that you will receive. I will offer kind of 1 hour strategy sessions, or if people want to get a package of 3 sessions, that's on the table as well. It's an option.
Great. So we've got 2 really great questions I want to get to. Raquel or Rachel, I'm not sure, but she says that sometimes I struggle with feeling insecure about interviewing in terms of what to wear and how to present myself. I know you touched upon this, but she goes on to say, as a woman in academia, I feel like I struggle on what to wear, how to speak, and a lot of the advice I read seems very gendered. What would you have to say about that?
Woo, that kicks up a lot of stuff for me. I'm actually working on my doctorate right now, and I'm constantly in that setting. Okay, I have a long-winded answer and a short-winded answer.
And we have a little bit of a time.
So the first thing is, you really want to think about what is the change that you want to make in that role. There's some people who want to come in as change makers. And so from the onset, you're going to own the way you talk. You're going to own the way you dress, because that's who you want people to see you as. Maybe you're someone who wants to get your foot in the door, and then you start to create that change. Knowing what your end goal is going to inform how you show up. So if you're someone who wants to be inside and create those changes, then you're going to do the status quo, what you see people dress as, how you see people talk, the language that they use. Or if you want to come in and you're already a disruptor or, resistor, and I'm all about that life, then you're going to talk in a way that people see that from the onset. So it's really, again, kind of like getting clear on what the change is that you want to create and what is causing that discomfort.
Totally. And I would add to that unfortunately, Raquel, a lot of this advice is super gendered, and that's not good news for women. It's like there are 17 ways in which a woman can dress inappropriately at the office, and there's like one way for a guy to dress inappropriately at the office, and that sucks. That's bullshit. At the end of the day, as someone who gives a lot of advice on how to present yourself persuasively, I always say that the style can't mask substance. So don't over invest in your style or freak out about not looking your best at the risk of preparing less or feeling less confident. At the end of the day, I'm all about monotone colors, keeping everything as simple as possible and not distracting from what you have to say. So if there's anything you're wearing that's jingling, that's moving, that's making noise, it has the risk of distracting from what you have to say. So especially during the interview, if you're not there to make a bold statement, consider it an opportunity to present yourself in a way that your outfit doesn't distract from your interview question answers. And, there's no perfect art to that. I am no fashionista myself. So don't freak out about it. Don't let it stress you out and focus on your purpose, even if that means getting the fashion thing wrong on occasion.
Yeah.
We've got a great couple of questions here about the interview process when they won't stop bringing up those tricky HR questions. So Kay Green asks, what if they're repeatedly asking what you make now? And as a follow-up, Yami says, listen, my salary is below market value by far. How can I avoid answering it so I can get back up to market value?
Yeah. Okay. So before we do that, I do want to say one thing that I forgot. That some people have events that may influence the ways that people see them. So please know your interviewers are Googling you. Yeah. They're going to see your profiles. So first off, if you have things that are questionable, get that stuff off. And if you have something that hit the news, so I interviewed someone who had some, did something really just not thinking, asinine, and it hit the news. And so on their resume at the bottom, they said, if you Google me, you might find this. This is what happened since. And they kind of took ownership of it from up front. The interview is another space where maybe you're going to be asked about something that you did, even if you were arrested for protesting, and that doesn't maybe fit the status quo of that organization. Just be prepared to have that conversation around it and, who you are both on the front end and kind of what maybe some of your thought process was on the back end. Okay. So I just want to plug that.
Great piece of advice.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, so I have to say from experience, I have never asked someone about how much money they make in an interview.
I've got this great technique, if you don't mind me hopping in here.
Please.
Oh gosh, hold on. I just loaded my YouTube page so I can find the video URL for you because this is my most watched video on YouTube. It's all about how to pivot from the salary question when it comes up. So here's the deal. Asking what someone's making right now and basing the offer off of that perpetuates injustice. It perpetuates pay gaps between women and men and people of color and non-people of color, white people. And so folks who are asking that, they are either ignorant of the fact that they're perpetuating injustice or not caring that that's what they're doing. In many states, it's becoming illegal because it perpetuates systemic injustice. So whatever you do, it is your job in the interview to, as pleasantly as possible, refuse to answer that question. And I know that can feel scary because people are persistent and it might keep coming up, but it is a game. And this is a game that is well worth you leaving it all on the mat for. It is well worth a few minutes of uncomfortable discussion to avoid a lifetime of being underpaid. So here's the 3-step strategy I recommend. First, flat out refuse to answer the question. As pleasantly as possible, while smiling, you might want to say something like, it's a little early to discuss salary. Or I'm not comfortable discussing salary at this early stage in the game. And then, and this is important, immediately assuage their underlying concern, which is, I don't know if we can afford you. Are we just wasting each other's time here? So say something like, I'm sure if everything else works out, salary won't be an issue. Or you might want to say, I'm sure when the time comes, we'll be able to find a salary number that works for both of us. So you refuse, and then you assuage their concern. You calm them down. And step 3 of this little 3-step strategy is to get off the topic. Do whatever you can do to ask an open-ended question that brings the conversation elsewhere. Can you tell me about the review process? Can you tell me where you see me in 5 years if I were to stay with this company? Anything you can do to move the conversation along makes it a little bit harder for them to continuously badger you on this one question. That being said, they might come back and say, actually, I'm not ready to move on. We really need to know your salary in order to continue this conversation. That's when you're going to just rinse and repeat. Listen, I'm not comfortable sharing my salary at this time in the interview process, but I'm confident we'll be able to make things work if we choose to move forward. You know?
Emilie, what do you think about, because when I've changed sectors, I've researched how much people made in that role, and that's what I based my negotiations off of. And I love salary negotiations. I have a whole checklist on that too.
I just think the salary negotiation does not begin until the hard offer has been made. So
exactly.
As long as you are not, I'm pulling up the video
for your
right now.
Dream job.
Sorry, I'm going to pop it in chat. But as long as you're in an interview, you're not negotiating your salary. Leave the interview without talking numbers. Give them the chance to write up an offer for you and make an offer. Maybe you'll get a phone call or maybe you'll get a written offer, but you're not talking numbers in the interview.
I've never done that. So that's really interesting. And Emilie, that's actually a great point that you can defer that once they have, offered you, in the next conversation, you look forward to talking about, salary points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's helpful because they're still interviewing other people. So put the onus on them to make an offer. I remember when I was interviewing with the How Stuff Works Network, which I was just a podcast co-host of for about a year, I said to them, I'm sure you'll come up with a competitive offer and I look forward to seeing it. If you want to move forward with me, you're going to have to give me an offer. You don't walk into Nordstrom's and say, I want this bag and have the cashier say, well, how much would you pay for it?
Yeah.
Right? They're offering you a job. They got to offer you a salary and benefit structure. There's tons more resources on our blog about negotiation, which I highly recommend. But start with this video on our YouTube channel. And
I think you underscore a really great point, Emilie. We got to make them work. We come in and we're like kind of in scarcity mode, or you're just insecure and you're like, hire me. No. Right. You're going to bring like light and love into their workplace. So and I have to say that the people that I've been able to negotiate $20,000, $30,000 more was when it's like, you're going to work because you want me, because I have these skill sets. That's right.
Someone had a great follow-up saying, I often have to put numbers in order to apply online. And I am a big believer in entering funny numbers, ambitious numbers, zeros, or just the word negotiable. And if you're only applying to jobs via online applications, there's a bigger problem there. So, keep in mind that you've got to answer. If you've got to put numbers in, put funny numbers in. But,
and sorry, Emilie, you just made me think of something else. If you know someone and they got you an interview, share how you know that person and share all the lights and, like the positives about that interaction, because that is a gateway that puts you above other candidates.
Totally. Erin, thank you so much for sharing your time and talents with our bosses today. I'll make sure to include Erin's checklist link in the follow-up email. And I want to make sure that anyone who's a job seeker out there knows some of the other resources we have available to you, including our expert trainers like Erin. First and foremost, we have a really affordable $25 email career course that's all about getting ready for your job search. So if that's something you want a step-by-step strategy for, it's $25. It's called Pregame Your Career Change, and it bundles all of my top advice for how to get from looking for a job to landing an offer. The online courage community that we have on Facebook is the best place on Facebook to go for support and camaraderie when you're navigating career change, where so many women are supporting each other, providing advice, and it's just a really positive, encouraging environment. If you're not in there already, sign up at the top page of bossedup.org or search Bossed Up Courage Community on Facebook. And finally, the best thing we do is Bossed Up Bootcamp. It's the program that started it all 5 years ago now, this year. Bossed Up Bootcamp is a 2-day intensive interactive training program. If anyone here is in the chat who's been to Bossed Up Bootcamp and wants to share a few words about your experience, now would be the time. We've got 5 bootcamps this year. A lot of ladies are clamoring for us to add a few more to the schedule, but we're not sure if we can do that just yet. So catch us while you can. We are filling up quickly for next month in New York City on April 28th and 29th. So we have less than 20 spots left. So if that sounds like a really powerful thing that'll help navigate career transition in your life, you should see all of this on your screen right now. Are you seeing that, Erin?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you again, Erin, so much for joining us today. I'll be in your inboxes with this recording and with links to follow up with Erin's generous offers. And it sounds like people really enjoyed themselves today. So thank you for being here.
Awesome.
All right, everybody, keep bossing, and we'll talk to you soon.